Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start with this lady who has a bold plan. Let's hear her out.
Vasectomies for baby boys. Yeah, I said it. And if that made you flinch, good. You won't want to miss part 2 either. Trust me. You want to solve half of society's problems? Start there. Fix the fathers, fix the future. This one move would take women out of survival mode, kids out of poverty, and society out of chaos. And the only ones mad would be the ones that never wanted accountability in the first place.
I think that would reduce crime, but I'm pretty sure mandatory vasectomies for boys would also end humankind as we know it. The Minnesota Vikings, let's talk about them. They've decided that football fans are just gagging for some male cheerleaders, but not the type that throw the girls in the air, the type who dance like girls. And Minnesota has unveiled yet another male cheerleader. This one has fantastic hair. I've got to say, I'm a little bit jealous.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
Break down.
If you don't like me, that's fine. But, you know, watch your mouth.
You know, the Minnesota Vikings should add a third male cheerleader, and I know just the man, Tampon Tim Walz, the governor who put tampons in boys' bathrooms across Minnesota. You know, it makes sense. Let's put all that together. I think it's going to work.
Girl, what did that girl just say, girl? Ooh, girl, I don't dance, I work. I don't play, I slay. I don't walk, I strut, and then sashay. Okay. But I don't work for free. No, that's not the tea, hunty. No, man. So make it rain on me. And I might let you see. What you gonna let them see? My nails, hair, hips.
Let's check in now with the tolerant, loving, inclusive left. They are just a delightful group of people, aren't they? So open-minded, rational and happy. Like this gentleman who saw a couple of Republicans enjoying a coffee and thought they might enjoy being harassed with just irrational abuse. Maybe they'd also like to be spat on.
Hillary and Mulvaney for treason in the firing squad. What do you think? Good idea?
I don't know why you're assuming we share every opinion you find on the internet. And honestly, we'd like to get back to our... Sir, we'd like to get back to our coffee. You've made your point. We'd like to get back to our coffee.
You know what? Don't hide behind him or your yarmulke with your...
You'd think that man is old enough to know better, but sadly there is no cure for stage 4 TDS. And here we find out why he felt so entitled to attack 2 strangers in West Hartford.
I approached you because I heard you in there and out here talking about your Republican verities, okay? That's what you are. That's what you are. I'm a lawyer. I've done plenty of immigration. I'm asking you, do you know any immigrants? Do you know any migrants? Do you know any refugees? I'm not talking about what you read in the Hartford Current. You, do you know any?
What? Absolutely. Why are you cursing at us? I'm so confused. What did we do?
Because the President of the United States does.
What did myself and Ari do to you?
The President of the United States is always happy to say goddamn and mother and this and that.
Sir, what have we done to you? Well, please let us finish our coffee.
What has he done?
What have we done to you? Please let us finish our coffee.
By being out here speaking out about Republicans and Trumpism.
You know what? Those guys are too nice. They're too polite, too diplomatic. That lunatic deserves to be told he is a dim-witted bigot. That's what he deserves. The next generation of Republicans aren't going to be so polite. Now, guess who is back? Dylan Mulvaney, the dude who lampoons womanhood, has a new podcast.
In the shower, on a walk, the Dylan Hour, feeling sweet, feeling sour. I feel nothing. The Dylan Hour, my a drink or two or three. You have no friends, all good, you got me.
Now, the Trump administration's efforts to deport millions of illegal immigrants continues to be obstructed by blue cities, Democrat strongholds such as Chicago, LA and Boston. Let's hear now from the Boston Mayor, Michelle Wu.
Boston received a letter from the Attorney General of the United States on official letterhead from the federal government threatening to prosecute city officials and withhold federal funds unless we cooperate with carrying out mass deportations. These threats are serious and consequential. But our same communities have told me loud and clear that silence in the face of oppression is not an option.
Joining me now is political advisor and commentator CJ Pearson. CJ, there you have it. According to the Boston mayor, deporting illegal immigrants is oppression. When are these democracy deniers going to understand that Donald Trump has a mandate from the American people to implement these policies? This is what he campaigned on.
You know, it's as if they've been living under a rock, Rita, right? You know, the American people, as you just said, did give President Trump a mandate to secure our southern border and to make America safe again. This is exactly what he is doing. When the American people voted resoundingly for President Trump, they voted against open borders. They voted against allowing illegal aliens to be given a type of preferential treatment that even American citizens aren't given when breaking the law. And if the mayor of Boston has a problem with that, well, she should take it up with the 80+ million Americans who voted for President Trump.
Now to an Australian columnist who has written a piece for the Courier Mail, a newspaper here in Queensland, calling for Donald Trump to be banned from entering Australia. Madonna King has written, should a convicted felon guilty on dozens of accounts of falsifying business records be welcomed into Australia with open arms? What about an overseas criminal with a history of bragging about groping women? Would you allow him to bed down in your spare room? What about if this same man, an unrepentant offender and misogynist, used his office to hurt what you were fighting for in terms of climate, trade and security? Oh, CJ, there's plenty I'd like to say, but please do the honours.
You know, it's interesting that all of a sudden those on the left, even in Australia, all of a sudden care about who comes across their border, right? You know, if only liberals here in this country cared just as much about who actually slipped across our border, we would probably be a safer nation. You know, so it's interesting to see that, you know, from our friends, you know, across the world. But I guarantee you, I'm sure the prime minister over there will welcome President Trump anytime he wishes to make a trip over.
Oh, I think he would be absolutely begging the president to make a trip. He's been trying to get a one-on-one meeting to do some trade negotiations and has not been successful thus far. But that is the level of coverage on US politics that you get in Australia, you get throughout much of the Western world. Does that trouble Americans at all? Because it's pathetic. It is pathetic, but do Americans care that their president is so misunderstood and misrepresented by the mainstream media?
No, because we understand him. We understand this is a leader who leads from the front and not from behind. This is someone who does as he says and means what he says when he says it. And this is a man who actually intends to deliver on the promises that he made to the American people. He's not some career politician who runs on one thing and does another. And so while the cosmopolitan liberals in New York City and LA and DC pretend to not understand what he's doing, the American people fundamentally and emphatically understand what he's doing. And they know that all that he is doing will make America great again, and we are 10 toes behind him in doing that.
Now, CJ, you posted an image of Monday's meeting of world leaders gathered at the Oval Office to discuss an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Tell me what you see in this image, why you see it as so significant.
You know, I see an America that's finally leading from the front again. You know, under Joe Biden, we had a man in the Oval Office who didn't even know that he was president of the United States. And looking at that picture, frankly, it's a breath of fresh air. The world respects us again. The world fears us again. And that's exactly what we need to do if we're going to bring peace to the world again. You know, as Vladimir Putin even acknowledged in his press conference just a few days ago, this war in Ukraine would have never happened if Donald Trump had been in the White House. And now we are inching closer and closer to peace every single day because of his bold and decisive leadership.
And we had the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, saying something has changed after now more than 2 years of this devastating war. There is finally a shift and peace seems possible. How hopeful are you that there is going to be a peace deal with Russia and Ukraine? It's the one big conflict, other than what's happening in the Middle East, that Trump hasn't been able to do much about until this point.
You know, I'm immensely hopeful because I know the American people didn't just elect a commander-in-chief in Donald Trump, but they elected a deal-maker-in-chief. This is a man who literally wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, and he is showing us in real time what that actually looks like. If anyone can bring peace to this conflict, it's going to be President Trump. And you ask me, do I feel hopeful? I feel a lot more hopeful today than I ever did under Joe Biden when he was in the White House.
Now, I want to ask you about a saga that's involving the New Yorker, a magazine you're very well aware of, after they really did a hit piece on you, suggesting you were having some white supremacist MAGA party when they cropped out all the people of colour from the picture. But they've got another saga at the moment with a writer called Doreen St. Felix who called Sydney Sweeney an Aryan princess. Well, this supposedly anti-racist writer has in fact posted some virulently racist statements. She has said things like, whiteness fills me with a lot of hate and the Holocaust is the worst thing to happen to black people. How is the New Yorker handling this controversy?
You know, it's absolutely disgusting, but oftentimes, you know, it's actually part of the course. We see that a lot of these people who are quick to point out that you're racist and they're racist are often the true racists themselves, as is shown by this entire saga. Will the New Yorker actually punish her in any real way? Remains to be seen. They didn't actually punish the writer who wrote the defamatory piece about me, so I actually don't hold out much hope for that. But what I will say is that stories like this are exactly why so many people, not only here in America, but across the world, are losing faith rapidly in the corporate media, and there doesn't seem to be any chance that they'll be regaining it anytime soon.
Well, it's just so blatantly hypocritical, isn't it, to hold yourself up as some sort of anti-racist warrior when you are spewing this racist diatribe on a fairly consistent fashion. There were plenty of other statements I could have quoted there. And with the New Yorker, I know you've got a legal action proceeding against them. Any update on that?
You know, we're fully, you know, completely charging ahead on this, and as we see, it's needed. It continues to be needed because Brock Collier, the reporter who wrote the piece about me, is not alone. We also see that his colleagues share a lot of the sentiments. And, you know, what's interesting to me is that people wonder, why do these people continue to misunderstand Trump's America? Why do they continue to misunderstand, you know, the other half of this country? They don't misunderstand half of this country. They hate half of this country. And the sooner you actually realize that, it actually all makes sense about why they speak the way that they do about all of us.
Now to a story in today's New York Post. They report Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has pulled the security clearance of 37 current and former officials for the part they played in the Russian collusion hoax. CJ, this is just another step, another development in holding those who abuse public trust and deliberately push misinformation accountable.
Exactly is that. And, God bless Tulsi Gabbard for being the position that she is and bringing accountability to a place that is desperately needed. I think a lot of people have lost faith in our intelligence community, which is actually very counterintuitive. If there's anyone we should be able to trust, it should be our intelligence community. And so these people who abuse their positions, abuse their powers, and actively subvert it, the rule of law and weaponize government against, again, half of America should be held to account. And Tulsi Gabbard is doing just that with this latest move.
Before you go, do you expect to see the likes of the former CIA Director John Brennan or FBI Director James Comey actually face criminal charges? There's reports they're under investigation. We've got James Comey unravelling. He's posting these bizarre videos about Taylor Swift that are rather creepy. Do you see some real accountability happening at some point?
God willing. And, I'll tell you this, if Pam Bondi is able to secure that, J.D. Vance might have some competition in 2028.
Well, that could be a good ticket, J.D. Vance and Pam Bondi. That would be a formidable ticket right there. CJ Pearson, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Let's have a look at this interaction in the White House briefing room. And this question from a New York Times reporter really is typical of the media pack's determination to denigrate every step in this peace process, in President Trump's efforts to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. And Caroline Leavitt wasn't having it.
The point is to get everybody on the same page. Why wouldn't Trump just take the call from Putin while the other leaders were in the room? He said it would be disrespectful to do that. But why is it disrespectful?
With all due respect, only a reporter from the New York Times would ask a question like that, Sean. The president met with all of these European leaders at the White House 48 hours after sitting down with President Putin on American soil. In fact, there was so much progress in the readout that was given to these European leaders immediately following his meeting with President Putin that every single one of them got on a plane 48 hours later and flew to the United States of America. So these leaders, who this war is in their backyard, are very grateful that the president took that call and that he was there to provide them with a readout of Russia's thinking on this, something that was not done by the previous administration at all.
Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, the progress we have seen in the past week has been significant. That is undeniable.
Absolutely it is. And I think that was such a high school level question that New York Times reporter needs to go home, dust off his dictionary and look up the word mediator, mediation. That's mediation 101. You don't tip the hand of one party that's adversarial to the other party and invite them in and express favoritism for one side. It's pretty obvious, but I just think they're so irked with Trump's relationship, if you will, with Putin, whether it's friendly, not friendly, practical, pragmatic, the fact that he's willing to meet, willing to talk, that really irks them, especially after 10 years of, as Trump calls it, Russia, Russia, Russia. That whole story that's further unraveling kind of undergirds this one. But
which again
absolutely
really undermined the media's credibility, particularly papers like the New York Times, who just pushed that hoax uncritically. They did not question it for a second.
Never issued a retraction, haven't done it, and Trump in the background is suing the Pulitzer Committee. And there's all sorts of things, serious and funny, that are happening around that. But that sort of is an undercurrent for that whole question. But the bottom line is, as it relates to the serious business of stopping this killing and getting a peace agreement, you're absolutely right. More progress has been made in the last 2 weeks than was made in 2 years under Biden when this war started. And the whole world can see it, even if the New York Times doesn't want to admit it.
And the European leaders were open about stating that something has changed and they can actually see the prospect of a peace deal.
They heaped praise on him.
Now, this is astonishing and worrying. Australians are more concerned about Donald Trump's tariffs than the rising Chinese military threat. This is according to a recent news poll. This is, I think, partly due, Kosha, to the quality of reporting we see on US politics. And we have a lot of viewers in the US. If they're wondering what the US coverage is like, it's a mixture of MSNBC and Guardian and maybe inject a little bit of PBS into it. That's pretty much the diet that Australians get when it comes to US politics.
Yes, and tariffs was just made out to be this big, bad bogeyman. Article after article after article after broadcast was heralding it as the complete destruction and this thing that's never going to work, and Trump is too stupid to understand economics and all of that. So clearly, even though mainstream media is declining, as we know, it is still powerful. It does shape opinions. And I think in Australia, especially, mainstream media is a bigger part of the media diet of people as opposed to independents.
I think Australians aren't as aware as Americans to just how corrupted so many institutions have become with political ideology. So I think they are a bit more trusting. And it's not just the coverage we had on the tariffs, it's the coverage we've had on Donald Trump from, well, last 10 years almost. It's just been relentlessly negative in this country. So it's not surprising that there's some negative opinions.
Absolutely. And it is an opportunity, I think, for the right side of the political aisle here to really try and reframe media as what they are and an untrustworthy institution. They haven't quite done that as ferociously as Trump and team have.
Yeah, we're a little bit behind the game in that one. Now, the IPA has released research showing Australians have passed peak woke, with the majority of Generation Z now rejecting divisive identity politics. Daily Mail's also reporting that the IPA research was backed up by a survey which showed those aged 18 to 24 were increasingly rejecting woke ideas, in contrast to the age group directly above them. That is a surprise, because you do think, particularly when it comes to young women, that they are dangerously woke, but it seems perhaps the
tide is turning.
Tide has turned.
It is encouraging, if true. It reminds me of a couple of other stats that have come out in recent weeks. One was out of the UK, that same age group is more has a stronger belief in God, and they're returning to religion, which is very interesting. And then in the U.S., the biggest measure is what happened in the election. And that crowd, again, yes, more the young men versus the women, but that 18 to 24 crowd overall completely turned like 33 points or something between 10 years ago versus now with how they voted and voting for the Republican Party and for Trump in particular. So those little signs might be, as they say, the kids are all right. And if the future of civilization depends on them, maybe, just maybe, we have a chance.
It is going to be interesting to see the societal impact of this deep, deep divide between young men and young women. Now, that may change, the trends may change, but right now we're seeing young men in the West increasingly go right-wing, whilst the women are going the other way, or remaining at the very least fairly left. How is that going to play out? How are these people going to live together and have children and have families if their values are not aligned?
That is such an interesting observation. That, and then you throw into the mix cost of living and housing affordability, and all that is so difficult as well. So all of that hurts the ability for young people to meet, and get married and have kids, and all of that forms the basis of a stable middle class and a stable society. On the flip side, hopefully as they age and mature, that gap closes, or we might just see more silos and specialization, and maybe dating apps that go by political leanings or worldview will be on the rise potentially.
Now, this is fantastic news for the Trump administration, and particularly for any sort of future J.D. Vance administration. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, no longer wants to start a third party if J.D. Vance is the Republican candidate. This is a exclusive from the Wall Street Journal, Kosha. This is a big deal because whatever you think of Elon Musk, he does wield significant power, certainly significant money. And if he did have a third party, it would definitely be harming the Republicans more than the Democrats. It would splinter that vote. So this really does shore up J.D. Vance even more. I mean, he is the front runner anyway to be the next candidate.
As of now, and as they say, a week is a lifetime in politics, and the bench is strong. Marco Rubio, all sorts of other people, but for now, he is the favorite for sure. He's proving himself to be very loyal, not only to Trump, but more importantly to the MAGA, the populist right agenda.
The base loves him.
And
absolutely.
He has it all. So you're right that in the U.S. system, third parties never win, but they can be spoilers, and it's happened with Ross Perot and others, and he certainly has the money to do it and be that spoiler, at least be an influencer. And I don't know how many people took him seriously necessarily when he was toying with the idea of a third party, but the fact that he's coming out and saying this is good news for the two-party system that the U.S. does live in, and hopefully it stays that way.
And J.D. Vance is the perfect politician. I mean, you just look at his history, his achievements, his family, the whole package, his intellect and the way he loves the fight, loves the debate. He's so good at it. He's
so young, understands everything. He's relatable. So he really has a lot of tools.
Yeah, it's hard to see him being replaced. It is a long time away. Now, the Texas Democrats plan to spend the night in the state capitol to continue their protest about redistricting. Kosha, explain to the audience what this redistricting means. It's something that Democrats are typically very good at, but the Republicans want to do it in Texas and other places and make that vote more representative. Explain how this works.
So it basically comes down to what they call gerrymandering and where you draw the district lines, which is what will determine where the representatives in the House and the lower chamber come from. And they redraw it historically. The Democrats are better at it, as you say, in a way that populations that have more of an affinity to vote for Dems versus Republicans will fall in such a way that you get more seats. So it's sort of like doing funny business. So you've got states
where the Republicans may get 40% of the votes, but instead of having 40% of the representatives, they might have 10%.
10%, absolutely.
And that's what they're trying to address. Because
That's right.
Texas, again, it advantages the Democrats, even though it's a red state.
And they never play dirty to that point. And I think this is all a symptom of, Greg Abbott, who isn't exactly a fire breather, the governor of Texas, is taking this fight to the legislature because they have the majority in the state legislature that does that. You are seeing it spill out. You're seeing the other side, California and Gavin Newsom are trying to now do a retaliatory thing in the other direction. But this is all about the 2026 midterms, which has huge implications because there's a razor-thin margin for Republicans. And if they lose that, bet on it, Trump will face another impeachment.
Oh, that's all they know how to do. I mean, that will be fascinating to see if that happens, what they will conjure up to impeach him over, but
the third time.
It will happen. Now, before you go, we talked about the end of the woke era, and this may be another sign of it. ESPN, which is very woke, has canned Spike Lee's Colin Kaepernick docuseries. Walt Disney-owned ESPN is known for these sort of left-wing projects, but they have canned this one, and we don't exactly know why, Kosha, but people have their suspicions.
Another interesting signal. I mean, Colin Kaepernick is so 2016, as the kids say, and his whole bending the knee kind of came and went. And to put out a documentary that probably would have centered around that and his activism just feels...
The whole BLM era.
Too much in the past. Like, so much has changed in the world, in the country, and audience appetite. So encouraging and interesting that the ESPN, which is not a particularly centrist or right-leaning organization, is doing that. I don't think we're out of the woods because you've got Netflix putting out a documentary on Jussie Smollett. Remember him coming out with some story about how he actually wasn't perpetrating a hoax.
And he wasn't, was he?
He's doing a whole documentary that Netflix is putting out. So we're still not out of the woods, but this is promising by ESPN.
Yes. Kosha Gator, thank you so much for your time.